I thought if we ever broke up, I would feel this tremendous sense of relief. I could go back to being myself. But something happened. I fell in love with you or something. And I stopped being a loner.
Dylan, I think that's wonderful.
I think it's terrible.
You can look the other way once, and it's no big deal. Except it makes it easier for you to compromise the next time. And pretty soon, that's all you're doing is compromising because that's how you think things are done.
Using his vast knowledge of history and politics, we start our day off right with motivational speaker Richard Battle.
Yeah, we've got him, Richard Battle, on the program. Mr. Battle, how are you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Al. Thank you for letting me bat lead off, and I've
Always
been studying all night for this show
today.
today.
We got a bunch of new listeners this week. Always happy to have new listeners on. But then I'm thinking about, I'm like, they don't know who Richard Battle is. We can go on there and maybe they catch up on the long run, or we can do a quick synopsis on Mr. Battle. Do you mind? Let's delve into Mr. Battle just for a moment.
This is the hardest show to prepare for.
Here's you and I know it was 5 books ago, because I'm looking back at it's 5 books ago, Navigating Life's Journey, Common Sense in Uncommon Times. I'm not sure how, when you're published, somehow I got a copy of the book. And I'm like, I like this book. I want to talk to this author. And when did you write Navigating Life's Journey? How long ago have you been doing this? 5 years?
Well, it was published in 2020.
No.
And, but I'm not sure if we were doing it just before that or that started it.
I don't recall. But anyway, so I find you fascinating. Let's go, if you don't mind. I'm going to do a little interview here. Give me Richard Battle's background. I knew you were a business guy for quite some time. You've written some business books. Where did you grow up? Give us a quick 30-second elevator. What got you in the business world and what you did?
Well, I grew up outside of Dallas, Texas, in a small suburb at that time of 4,000 or 5,000 people. And my grandparents on my dad's side were in the farming business. So I spent a lot of my best days on their farm. My grandmother on my mother's side lived in a tiny little town and had an individual business. So I saw a small town in addition to the farm, in addition to the small town I was in, and generally just all American upbringing, where at the time we didn't have all these luxuries today. So sometimes we had to create our own entertainment as opposed to having someone entertain us, and loved to play sports, and got out of school and went to the University of Texas at Austin and graduated there and went in the business world.
And what did you graduate with, sir? Business degree?
It was a marketing business degree. Yes.
So then you take off in the business world in the big city, and what happened? Where'd you go and that sort of thing?
Well, except for 1 year, I spent my career by choice in the Austin, Texas area, but I began with an individual sales territory and finished many years later with global responsibility, running an organization and a sales business. And it was always in disruptive technology. So all the technologies that I worked with during my career were industries that weren't even around, generally speaking, many years before I got involved with them. Sometimes they were just starting.
All right. So you got a pretty successful business life going on. Are you married, children? Where were you then at the peak?
Well, I'd been married and been single and no children, and got married a little bit later in life and had my first son when I was 45. And
let's wait on that.
Oh, okay.
I want to interrupt, but I want to get through some of the other stuff. At some point, you want to write a book, and the first ones were not about your son, right?
No. So I tell people, because they see all the books I've done and they say, "Did you always dream to write?" And I say, no, my English teachers never dreamed I'd read a book, much less write one. And I never dreamed I'd write one, much less now 11 and in June 12. And I never dreamed I'd write some of these books that we have now because they've been inspired. And what happened was I always had a feel from the first time I ever experienced a volunteer effort. It always made me feel good to see a project completed and people who benefited from doing something to help others. And so I was involved with the JCs in Austin back in the 80s. and ended up being president of that chapter. And the year I was president, and this was back when the JCs had
Yeah.
several 100,000 members in the U.S., and it was what every young man did at that time, and then later
Yeah.
women were involved. And we were recognized as the outstanding chapter in the United States. And then I received an international award that year, which led me to teach a day-and-a-half course at an annual retreat for chapter presidents, which I did for 6 years. And one of the things I found was usually the people one year would have been the vice presidents the year before.
Yeah.
And I found that the people I taught for a day and a half never taught the things that I
the
taught
next
them
one.
to their subordinates. And so there was no continuity of leadership.
Mhm.
And so that inspired me to write the first book I did, which was the Volunteer Handbook, which was basically how to lead a volunteer organization. And leading volunteers is totally different than business or any other organization, because you can't use job security or money as motivational tools. So you have to use other things to inspire people.
So that gets you up. You write your first book, and things are going well. Then a major moment in your life happens, I presume, with your son.
Well,
No.
yes. And so I write that book, and I never dreamed I'd write a second book.
Yeah.
And so many years pass, and as we say, married, had a son, and I had a concern that what happens if I don't live to see him grow up and teach him life's important lessons. So I wrote a letter to him when he was 6 months old. Well, unfortunately, he passed 3 months later. And the way that I grieve the loss, and I hope nobody out there listening suffers it. I mean, people have suffered worse than I have. And I knew a guy I served in the state guard with who lost 3 kids in one night in a house fire. So I'm not whining about my loss, but it was the worst thing I ever had happen. And so reading scripture, reading any books about the loss of a child, and then I would write notes about what I was experiencing in my calendar every day. And about 5 months later, a couple in church lost a son. And so I photocopied some of those pages, trying to help them. And they said, you should publish this because it'll help other people. And that's what created Surviving Grief by God's Grace, about the loss of my son. And so it's a faith-based book about how God helped me get through that.
And I understand what you're saying. Other people have had it worse, but many people are in the boat you've been in. A lot of us, thank God, have not, but many people are, and it's called Surviving Grief by God's Grace. I think people need to see this book. It goes over well. I mean, a niche market, hopefully, but then you wrote the next book. Where did the next one come from?
Well, and so what was interesting, I did a lot of radio and TV with Surviving Grief by God's Grace, again, because I was trying to help people who may be going through that experience. None of the things I've done have made me wealthy and made me more famous than I am on the Owl Show.
Hey.
But so while I was promoting, if you will, Surviving Grief by God's Grace, my business organization required me to go to a Dale Carnegie course. And the homework one night they gave us was, what one lesson did you learn from your first job? And so I went home that night and I was thinking, and I started thinking of the things I learned from the first job I had. And I thought of 14 of them and wrote them on a piece of paper and put them in a drawer because I was promoting this other book. And that was my first job, was as an 11-year-old paper boy. It was during the 2 years my parents drugged me to Chicago to live and in 5th and 6th grade. And I worked 7 days a week and I made $6 a week. So
there you go.
I had to collect every week 70 cents for the subscription fees. But when I look back on that, I saw all these lessons I learned as an 11-year-old that influenced my entire life. And so the book, The 4-Letter Word That Builds Character, came out of that in 2006. And then I went into a period where I couldn't really write or publish from a business standpoint. So there was a period after that, there was no activity.
All right. And then was it the Master Sales Secret, the next one? What was the next one?
Yes. So my
just quickly,
plan
about
when
30
I got
seconds.
ready to leave the business world, and I was in a business where I could have stayed as long as I wanted to, and I enjoyed it, and I loved working with the people. But I wanted to do other things. I felt like there were other things that I could do and share, and then hopefully leave for people that could be of help. And so I thought I would take the business route. And from all the sales and business training I had done, I put together the Master Sales Secrets and published it in 2018. And I was going to take off in a consulting and speaking environment on the business world. And a friend of mine said, there's jillions of business books. You can help a lot more people if you just write about what you've experienced.
Oh, yeah.
And so at that time, I had just experienced in one 10-month period a divorce, 2 heart procedures, and a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so I pivoted to write a book that was forwarded by Larry Gatlin called Unwelcome Opportunity, because I didn't want it, but it gave me an opportunity to really see life in a different way and embrace this different direction that I've ended up going.
Fair enough. We got to go to break. When we come back, we're halfway there, because I think that's where the first book I had come in, Navigating Life's Journey. I might be off one. We'll find out next with Richard Battle on The Al Travis Show.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
If it's your turn to host a game, Grandpa's Barbecue suggests you try something different. Put out the perfect barbecue flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. Add it to your ribs, dip the meatballs, or drench your wings in the original flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. It isn't too hot or spicy, fruity or smoky or whatever. Grandpa's Barbecue. Available in select stores and online at grandpasbarbecueshop.com.
As in alligator. L also in alligator. But it's not alligator. It's the Al Travis Show.
And we're talking with Richard Battle. Love having him on the program. Kind of got through his workbooks and how to make great businesses. And somebody mentioned to him, hey, you might want to talk about all the other things. He had a cancer diagnosis, heart problems, divorce, a loss of a child, and you wrote The Unwelcome Opportunity. What came after that, my friend?
Well, and once I made that shift on track, then I started thinking about how can I speak or what methods can I use to encourage others? And so that's when I turned to a couple of books about common sense, because the country at that time, similar to some would think today, was losing common sense. And so Conquering Life's Course in 2019 was the first effort in that area. And it's a series of essays. Everything I've done, I attempt to have something that's timeless, that somebody can pick up 10, 20, 50 years from today, and there'll still be value in it. It won't be just a doorstop, if you will. And so 2019, Conquering Life's Course, there's a series of essays on various topics people can use for instruction or speaking or just life lessons, if you will.
All right, and I want to speed us up. We're going to run out of time. Then came Navigating Life's Journey. That's where I met you.
Yes,
Love this
similar.
book. Absolutely. And it was about life lessons. Got to pick it up if you haven't read it, Navigating Life's Journey. The one after that, was it Life's Daily
Treasure? Life's Daily Treasure.
I'm not a daily diary. It's just something every day. It takes a minute and a half to read. It tells you a story about the day, a history part about the day, something you should think about the day. What kind of book is it? I mean, that wasn't the problem.
Well,
Can you tell me what it is?
What happened during COVID? What could help me feel better during COVID?
Yeah.
And so scripture, motivational quotes, thinking about things that were great or really good about America, because I'm a history guy, as you know, and we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And so I thought about these things that helped me to think positively during COVID. And then I had inspiration one day. Well, if they help me, they'll help somebody else. And so I think every day is one page, as you said, and it's turned out to be the greatest gift book, because it's only a minute a day to read it, but you'll leave with a smile on your face every day.
366 doses of hope, optimism, personal growth, and encouragement. Then came Made in America by Americans, not AmeriCANS. What started that? And I want to get these last ones done, my friend.
Again, it was people telling us in the U.S. what we can't do. It made me sick. And so our country was built and successfully by people who had the can-do spirit. So again, this is a series of essays, positive, that people can use for leadership roles, inspiration, etc.
And then you open that drawer up with that letter you wrote to your son, 6 months old. He died 3 months later. And that created this next one. Tell us the story about that, and I've got 3 minutes.
Again, the only time I'd used that letter was an appendix in Surviving Grief by God's Grace and one other book. And I was doing Father's Day radio hits in 2022, and there was one in Texas, 4 minutes long, on a station in another state from you, not Texas. And unbeknownst to me, somebody walked in while I was doing this 4-minute interview, and I'm abbreviating this, and heard me. And they called while I was driving home. And when I answered the phone, they said, "Were you the guy speaking on the phone?" They didn't realize I was on the radio. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I wanted to call and say thank you. Last night I prayed to God all night long He'd send somebody to say something to me to help soothe my spirit. And I think He sent you. I lost my daughter 2 months ago."
Oh, wow.
And it was the most humbling experience ever. And a friend said, "You should take that, expand on the letter, and write a book that would help parents." And that's what the unopened present is, because my son never got to open the present of the letter to help him with life, but the readers can.
See, and I think that's what's so fascinating about it. And I got that book. Obviously, it is the greatest book of all time, in that it's generational. I give this to my kids when they're going to have kids, so that they can understand. You got to write this stuff down. You got to make it. Now, maybe they don't write it anymore, maybe a video presentation, but you've got to know what you want to tell your kids to make sure they get it. I just absolutely love that book.
Well, thank you. And that's the whole point, because if you don't go through and think about it, and I had a daughter after my son passed, and if you don't go through and think about it, then all of a sudden you think of something and they're too old to want to hear it from you.
Yeah, then they get into terrible teens. Yeah, okay. And then finally, and because we're going to talk about this for a while yet, but then we've been talking now about AmeriCANS Who Made America, the birth of this 18th century birth of the Republic. This is your history thing. This is where you and I really kind of get along. I love history. And in your book, 40 different folks, I'm going to say there's at least 10 that I might have known the name, 5 I didn't know at all, and you give these great pieces on them that I think people have to know about American history. Give me the 1 minute. How can I pick that up? Or any of these books?
Well, and again, this is all about us being American spirit. And I want to make this because they're not teaching history and civics in school. And I want to make it to where young people can learn by reading or their parents telling them. And so all of these books are available at richardbattle.com signed. If you'd like one inscribed for birthday or graduation gifts, etc., email me, richard@richardbattle.com. We're happy to do that. Everything's on Amazon. We have Kindle and audio on almost everything also.
You know, I love having you in this program. We'll talk more about Americans who made America great. We also realize that it's the 18th century. There are other centuries you're going to cover, and we'll talk about those as well.
Absolutely. June 10th, 19th century will premiere.
I love that. Mr. Battle, thanks for coming to the program. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Al. God bless America.